Also breaking tonight, an arrest warrant issued for Lakers center DeMarcus Cousins in Mobile County. The charge, domestic violence. This after his ex-girlfriend and the mother of his 7-year-old son filed a police report alleging.
A Sacramento Kings player was one of 2 people arrested after a mob formed in the Nickerson Gardens housing project in Watts. Zach Randolph was arrested on a drug possession charge. Officers were investigating the area of 112th and Zamora Avenue.
Former Celtics and NBA player Rajon Rondo has been arrested following a traffic stop in Indiana. Officials say the 37-year-old was allegedly driving recklessly and was pulled over by a trooper. Now, the trooper says they observed the smell.
The Wizards began the new year with the NBA's 6th worst record at 10-20. Now come reports from the New York Post and Yahoo Sports, both citing unidentified sources that say Wizards point guard Gilbert Arenas and teammate Javaris Crittenden allegedly drew guns on each other during a recent locker room argument over a gambling debt.
Picture this. You're courtside at an NBA game, watching your favorite player sink three-pointers like it's nothing. The crowd's going wild. But what if I told you that same player you're cheering for has a rap sheet longer than their list of achievements? Today, we're diving into the shocking world of NBA stars who found themselves on the wrong side of the law. From minor offenses to major crimes, these stories will make you question everything you thought you knew about your basketball heroes. Get ready, because this isn't the highlight reel you're used to seeing. Let's kick things off with a name that might surprise you: Allen Iverson. The Answer, as fans called him, was known for his incredible speed and crossover moves. But did you know he once got tangled up with the law in a big way? Back in 1993, before he even made it to the NBA, Iverson was involved in a brawl at a bowling alley. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with 10 years suspended. Luckily for him, he only served 4 months before being granted clemency by the governor. Talk about a close call that could have ended his career before it even started. Iverson's story is more than just a cautionary tale. It highlights a broader issue in the NBA and society at large: the school-to-prison pipeline that disproportionately affects young black men. Many players come from challenging backgrounds, and their rise to NBA stardom is often seen as a way out. But what happens when the pressures of fame and fortune collide with the habits and influences of their past? Now, let's fast forward to more recent times and talk about a player who was making headlines for all the wrong reasons: Gilbert Arenas. Remember him? The 3-time All-Star who played for the Wizards? Well, in 2009, Arenas got into hot water for bringing guns into the Wizards' locker room. Not just one gun, but 4. He claimed it was a joke gone wrong, but the NBA and the law didn't find it funny at all. Arenas ended up pleading guilty to carrying a pistol without a license and was suspended for most of the 2009-2010 season. The Arenas incident had a massive impact on his career. Before the gun incident, he was a 3-time All-Star and one of the most exciting players in the league. After, he was never the same. His scoring average dropped, and he bounced around several teams before washing out of the league. It's a stark reminder of how one bad decision can derail even the most promising of careers. Let's shift gears and talk about a player who's been in and out of trouble throughout his career: DeMarcus Cousins. Boogie, as he's known, has had his fair share of run-ins with the law. In 2019, he was hit with a restraining order after allegedly threatening his ex-girlfriend. The charges were eventually dropped, but it wasn't his first brush with controversy. Cousins has been known for his temper on and off the court, racking up technical fouls and getting into altercations with teammates and coaches. It just goes to show that even star players aren't immune to personal issues spilling over into their professional lives. But not all NBA-related crimes happen during a player's active career. Take Javaris Crittenden, for example. Remember him? He was a first-round draft pick in 2007, but his NBA career was short-lived. In 2011, Crittenden was charged with the murder of a 22-year-old woman in Atlanta. The kicker? The shooting was allegedly meant for someone else, making the victim an innocent bystander. Crittenden eventually pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 23 years in prison. It's a stark reminder of how quickly things can go south when guns and poor decisions mix. Now let's talk about a case that shook the NBA to its core, the story of Jason Williams. Williams was an all-star center for the New Jersey Nets, known for his rebounding skills. But in 2002, his life took a tragic turn when he accidentally shot and killed his limo driver, Kostas Christofi. Williams claimed it was an accident that happened while he was showing off a shotgun, but he was eventually convicted of trying to cover up the shooting. He served 18 months in prison for aggravated assault. It's a sobering reminder that even unintentional actions can have severe consequences. But not all crimes committed by NBA players are violent. Some fall into the category of white-collar crime. Take Chris Webber, for instance. The five-time All-Star and former Rookie of the Year found himself in hot water over financial issues. In 2002, Webber was indicted on charges of lying to a grand jury about his relationship with a University of Michigan booster. He eventually pleaded guilty to criminal contempt in 2003, admitting that he had received money from the booster. While not as headline-grabbing as some other crimes, it still tarnished Webber's reputation and led to his records being erased from Michigan's books. Speaking of financial crimes, we can't forget about Tate George. While his NBA career was brief, his post-NBA exploits landed him in serious trouble. George was convicted in 2013 of running a $2 million Ponzi scheme that targeted fellow athletes. He used his status as a former NBA player to gain trust and swindle investors, including other pro basketball players. George was sentenced to 9 years in prison, showing that the fall from grace can be steep and long-lasting. Now let's talk about a more recent case that made waves in the NBA community, the arrest of Malik Beasley in 2020. Beasley, who was playing for the Minnesota Timberwolves at the time, was arrested on charges of marijuana possession and threats of violence. According to reports, he had pointed a gun at a family who had mistakenly pulled up to his rental home thinking it was part of a Parade of Homes tour. Beasley eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 120 days in jail, to be served after the NBA season. It's a reminder that even current players aren't immune to serious legal troubles. But perhaps one of the most infamous cases in NBA history is that of Latrell Sprewell. While not technically a crime, Sprewell's actions during a Warriors practice in 1997 could easily have led to criminal charges. In a fit of rage, Sprewell choked his coach, PJ Carlesimo, and threatened to kill him. The incident resulted in a 68-game suspension, the longest in NBA history at the time for an on-court incident. While Sprewell made a comeback and even became an all-star again, the choking incident forever changed how he was perceived by fans and the media. Let's also talk about Zach Randolph. Zebo, as fans affectionately called him, was arrested in 2017 for possession of marijuana with intent to sell. While the charges were later reduced and Randolph only received community service, the incident shed light on the NBA's complicated relationship with marijuana. At the time, the league still tested for marijuana use, despite growing calls for its acceptance as a pain management tool. Randolph's case became part of a larger conversation about drug policies in professional sports. Speaking of drug policies, we can't ignore the cautionary tale of O.J. Mayo. Once a highly touted prospect, Mayo was banned from the NBA in 2016 for violating the league's anti-drug program. While the specific substance wasn't disclosed, the ban was a minimum of 2 years. Mayo never made it back to the NBA, serving as a stark reminder of how quickly a promising career can derail. Now, let's shift gears and talk about a case that blurs the line between on-court and off-court behavior, the malice at the Palace. In 2004, a brawl broke out between the Indiana Pacers, the Detroit Pistons, and fans at the Palace of Auburn Hills. Ron Artest, now known as Meta Sandiford Artest, was at the center of it all, charging into the stands to confront a fan who had thrown a drink at him. The incident resulted in criminal charges for 5 players, including Artest, who was convicted of assault and sentenced to a year of probation, community service, and anger management counseling. The malice at the Palace wasn't just a black eye for the league, it changed the way the NBA approached security and fan interactions. Alcohol sales were limited, security was beefed up, and a clear line was drawn between players and fans. It's a prime example of how the actions of a few can lead to sweeping changes that affect everyone. Now, let's talk about a player whose legal troubles have become almost as well known as his on-court exploits, Dennis Rodman. The Worm, as he was nicknamed, has had numerous run-ins with the law over the years. From domestic violence charges to DUIs, Rodman's post-NBA life has been a series of legal skirmishes. In 2018, he was even charged with misdemeanor battery for allegedly slapping a man at a bar in Florida. Rodman's case raises questions about the long-term effects of fame and the challenges some players face in adjusting to life after basketball. But what about players who manage to turn their lives around after legal troubles? Caron Butler is a prime example. Before his NBA career, Butler was arrested 15 times before the age of 15. He spent time in a juvenile detention center and seemed headed down a dangerous path. But Butler turned things around, became an all-star in the NBA, and is now an advocate for at-risk youth. His story shows that a criminal past doesn't have to define a player's future. Let's also talk about the role of mental health in some of these incidents. Many players who've had run-ins with the law have later opened up about their struggles with mental health issues. Take Delonte West, for example. West, who played for several NBA teams, has had multiple arrests and has struggled with bipolar disorder and substance abuse. His story has shed light on the need for better mental health support in the league. The NBA has taken steps to address this, introducing a mental health program in 2018 that requires every team to have at least one mental health professional on staff. It's a step in the right direction, but cases like West's show that there's still work to be done. Now let's consider the impact these incidents have on team dynamics. When a player gets into legal trouble, it doesn't just affect them. It affects their teammates, coaches, and the entire organization. Take the case of Rajon Rondo, who was accused of pulling a gun on the mother of his children in 2022. While criminal charges weren't filed, the incident led to a civil lawsuit and undoubtedly caused tension within the Cavaliers organization, where Rondo was playing at the time. These situations force teams to make difficult decisions. Do they stand by their player? Cut ties immediately? The choices they make can have long-lasting effects on team chemistry and public perception. As we wrap up this exploration of NBA players and their run-ins with the law, we're left with more questions than answers. Is the NBA doing enough to support players and prevent these incidents? How do these cases affect the way young fans view their heroes? And perhaps most importantly, what responsibility do players have to be role models off the court? These aren't easy questions to answer, but they're crucial to consider as we continue to watch and support the league. The next time you cheer for your favorite player sinking a game-winning shot, take a moment to remember that there's always more to the story than what happens on the court. In the world of professional sports, the line between triumph and tragedy can be razor thin. Who knows what stories will unfold in the seasons to come? Keep watching, keep questioning, and remember, in the NBA, as in life, things aren't always as simple as they seem.